Today we're going to be demonstrating BriodgeSTOR VMware appliance. What we're going to do is first show the BriodgeSTOR GUI. We're going to carve off a LUN from the BriodgeSTOR appliance. Then we're going to go over to an ESX server, make a connection to our BriodgeSTOR appliance, and connect to that LUN, which will then give us some iSCSI storage. So the first thing that we're going to do is bring up a browser window and connect to the BriodgeSTOR appliance. So I will just bring in that name. I've already got it in my buffer. I'll bring up the name. It's the name of the server / BriodgeSTOR. It brings up a login screen. I will log in to the BriodgeSTOR appliance. And you'll see that in this BriodgeSTOR I have 3 terabytes of usable storage. Normally, a BriodgeSTOR that delivers out of the from BriodgeSTOR will have approximately 30 terabytes of storage. This is a small test box, but it's good for our purposes here. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a new volume. So I'll bring that down to create new volume, press submit. The volume name, you give it something that you can recognize. Usually I like to use the name of the server, and then you can't do a dash, so I'm going to go underscore apps dr710 underscore 190 underscore LUN 01, first LUN. And let's just carve off a terabyte of storage for this test. Press the submit button, and in just a few seconds I have a LUN carved off here. So now what we need to do is to go over to our VMware server, and I've got an icon for the VMware vSphere client on this server. So I'm just going to launch that. This is the IP address of my ESX 4.1 host, so I'm just going to log in right now. If you haven't connected your ESX server to iSCSI, there's a couple of things that need to be accomplished before we can make a connection to that LUN. Let's just go ahead and bring this over here, and I'll go ahead and make it full screen so we can see. The first thing what we're going to do is go over to configuration, and if we click on storage adapters, first of all we have to click on networking and see that we have a networking switch that's created. It was probably done when you built the ESX server. You gave it which network you wanted to connect to, which NIC, and it's all set and ready to go. But we have to have a VM kernel port configured in order to talk iSCSI out the back. And so what we're going to do is add a networking port. So we'll click on add networking. We're going to choose VM kernel. We'll click next here. We have one NIC that's available. VMNIC 0 is already being used for vSwitch 0. We have a NIC here that's up and running. It's a Gigi NIC. We'll choose that. Simply click the next button. We name it, and by default it's going to give you a network label of VM kernel. I like to try to identify it, so I'm using a network that has a 50 in it. You'll see later in just a minute what I'm talking about. So I'm going to label it VM kernel 50. We're not using this VM kernel port for vMotion or for fault tolerance, so we'll leave those boxes unchecked and we'll click next. We have to give this VM kernel port an IP address, and so I'll use 10.10.50.122, which corresponds to the last quadrant there, corresponds to the IP address of the box, so it makes it real nice. This is a private backend network that I've got configured in my lab. Give it the net mask and press next. Since it is a private backend network, I don't need to do any routing, so I don't need a gateway set. So I'm going to click no here at the question about whether or not I want to configure a gateway. So now you see I've got a new switch called vSwitch 1. The label is VM kernel 50. So now that I have that, I can go to storage adapters, look at my iSCSI software adapter, and it's by default it's going to be VMHBA32. I'll click properties. Now you'll notice here that our status is enabled. If you've never used iSCSI before, that will say disabled. And if it does, before you can configure an iSCSI connection, you've got to go into configure here and click the enable button. And when you do that, it'll come back up here, say enabled, and then you're able to make a connection. So what we're going to do is click on dynamic discovery, and we're going to add an iSCSI server location. That is going to be the IP address on that same back-end network of our BriodgeSTOR appliance. The default port for all iSCSI traffic is 3260, so we'll leave that there. You can define CHAP, which is for security authentication. Typically you don't. We're not going to do that here. We'll click OK. It goes out now. You'll see one of the nice things about the VMware client is that you can watch what's going on. You can see the progress. And when it's done, you'll see this iSCSI server location. So we're all set. And it's going to ask if we want to rescan the adapter. We're going to say yes to that. It takes just a few seconds to do that. Now, it doesn't see a connection yet. And the reason is because we have not logged in that iSCSI LUN yet. So we're going to go back over here to our browser window that's connected to the BriodgeSTOR appliance. And we're going to click the rescan button. And since we've defined that connection in the VMware server and told it, pointed it to our BriodgeSTOR appliance, that is going to show up here. Here it is. There is our iSCSI initiator from the VMware server. That's sitting here. So all we need to do, actually this is ours, sorry, this is the VMware appliance, VMware with the ESX server-122. That is our iSCSI initiator, and all we need to do to log in that LUN is click the box, and under apply allocation changes, click submit. When we apply the changes, that LUN is now logged into the ESX server. Simple as that. When you go back over to the VMware infrastructure client, now if you click rescan all, when the scan is completed, you will see a new disk down here. It's going to show up any second. And there it is. You see this -iSCSI disk. There it is. That's all there is to making an iSCSI connection. The last thing that we have to do is click on storage and add a new LUN to our VMware server. And so we're going to click disk LUN here. There it is. We'll select that LUN. There's some detailed information. It's got a terabyte of capacity. It's blank. It's going to be formatted with VMFS. We'll click next. We'll enter a data store name. We can call it anything you want to. Maybe BriodgeSTOR LUN 01. Anything you want to call it. We'll click next. We'll give it a block size name. By default, it'll tell you the largest capacity. That happens to match up pretty nicely, a 1 megabyte block size. If you were creating a larger LUN, larger than 1 gigabyte, actually, so if we want a 1 terabyte, we have to pick a 4 megabyte LUN because that's the largest that we can make it there for our 1 terabyte LUN. The largest LUN we can make in VMware is a 2 terabyte LUN, but ours is a 1 terabyte, so there it is. We will create that and click finish. And we're in progress right now. What we're doing is we're creating our VMFS data store and formatting it with VMFS file system. That'll take just a few moments to complete. And as soon as it's done, there it is, it's completed. There's our BriodgeSTOR LUN 01 that we just created. Now we can move VMDKs, we can move virtual machines to that LUN if we want to. We can create, if we have a virtual LUN and we need to create a data LUN, we can do that and choose that target, that LUN, that data store as the target of that data LUN. We're all set. We've got a new terabyte of data that we can use. That's it. That's how you create a LUN in BriodgeSTOR and connect it via iSCSI to your VMware server. That's it.